Afternoon. We've had a tremendous response to my last video concerning the heresy of Lubavitch. And of course it's a misnomer. I respond to the heresies, the so-called heresies of Lubavitch, at least to some of them. And so the question is, why is Lubavitch considered a heresy? And the answer is, there isn't any heresy there. It's just that certain people think that their ideas of what normative Jews should believe is the truth. And Chabad, Lubavitch, has an ideology, a philosophy, that's based upon the teachings not just of the Baal Shem Tov, but before him the Ari, before the Ari the Zohar, and all the way to the prophets. It's a tradition that was only at one time taught to mystics, to men who engaged in spiritual seeking, and it was not known by the masses. But that doesn't make it unauthentic. I'll give you an example. The idea that God has no physical body was not a popular idea until the end of the 12th century. Prior to that, many rabbis believed that God had a form. In fact, there is a book called Shir Koma, which wants to describe the grandeur and the greatness and the size of the Creator. And of course it's absurd. God is not a physical body, doesn't have any length or shape at all. And so the idea that the Torah talks about God's eyes and God's ears and God's nose raged and was filled with heat, which indicated an expression of anger, all of these are anthropomorphisms. They're just meant for us to understand what was going on within our relationship with God. In fact, there is no such thing as an anger or gladness within God. It's all relative to the relationship that God has established within the world. However, God somehow or other has some pleasure from all of our trying to serve and worship Him. That being said, this pleasure is not something that people have learned about or studied about until recently. So the reason why certain people called Chabad heretics is because they were not used to the concepts that Chabad Chassidus or Chassidus in general talk about. Chassidus in general talks about divine providence. Now everybody believes in divine providence. The difference is that Chassidic principle is that God oversees everything, that everything is by divine providence. It isn't just that there are rules that the world follows and we all follow those rules and everything is controlled by those rules. In fact, God can change those rules at any moment because those rules are created together with the world. For we, Chassidim, believe in the process called continuous creation. And that is why God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, starts with a Yud, indicating the continuous power of creation. The Yud indicates the future, or something that's continuous, and the last three letters is Hava, which is actualization. So this is the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the power that causes continuous actualization of everything, including you and me and the camera and everything in between. And so this idea of continuous creation and divine providence is not really a new idea. Those ideas are mentioned prior by certain midrashim, and for example, continuous creation is first mentioned in Medrash Tehillim, Medrash Shecher Tev. And it preceded the Baal Shem Tov by at least 1,000 years. And nonetheless, Rambam rejects that concept, feels that God placed all the rules of the world within the world and allowed for changes to take place at the onset of creation, so that there would be the Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea at a particular time, the giving of the Torah at a particular time. All of these were already prepared ahead of time in the process of the creative movement, the creative element of God, bringing mankind to a greater awareness, which will culminate in the coming of the Messiah. So according to Rambam, there is no direct involvement by God in the world. The world continues according to certain rules, and those rules are what caused the world to be. We don't believe that. We Chassidim believe that God himself causes everything to be at every moment. We also believe that everything is by divine choice, and that even though things appear to be natural, that itself is divine choice. So, is that a heresy? Well, depends. If you are a chassid of the Rambam, and we've denied the Rambam's opinion, then we are heretical. But we're not really heretical. We have a different opinion from the Rambam. The Vilna Gaon did not believe in the presence of God in the physical. That's his opinion. This opinion is actually part of a machlokas, an argument among the students of the Ari. There are those who believed that God was here within the physical, those who believed that God was not here in the physical. It's an argument in the 16th and 17th century between the students of the students of the students of the Ari, between the MISNAGDIM and the Shomer Emunim. And this argument, whether God contracted himself out of the world, projected a world outside of God's self, whether this actually is possible or not. The Vilna Gaon says it's possible, and we say it's not possible. We say that there cannot be anything outside of God, for God is not physical. It has no bounds, so there can't be anything outside of it, something that's unbounded. And the Vilna Gaon says, but God can do anything. So this goes back to the question as to whether or not God can create a rock that's so big that he won't be able to pick up. According to the Vilna Gaon, he can, and that means he won't be able to pick up the rock. According to the Chassidim, he can make any rock that's possible, any rock, but he can't make a rock that he can't pick up unless he decides he's not going to pick it up. So it's up to you what you want to believe. I choose to believe that God is here, that everything in the world is connected to God, that everything has a spark of godliness within it. The Vilna Gaon disagreed and doesn't hold that way. Just as the Rambam holds that there is no divine providence on everything. There's only divine providence on humanity, not on each individual animal. Actually, there's an interesting Gemara in Chulin, I think it's 59 or 68, where the Gemara asks, what does it mean that God's judgment is found in the deep? So they identify the cormorant. Cormorant is called the sholach. The sholach is a bird that will dive 15, 20, 30 feet into the water to catch a fish. So Rashi says that there are fish that misbehave, and that God punishes that fish for misbehaving and sends the cormorant to catch it. And that's what is meant, that your judgments are in the depths. Now wait a second. If there is no divine providence on individual fish, how can you say that God exercises God's judgment on individual fishes? Unless you're going to say it's not meant to be taken literally. But the Gemara says, sholach, cormorant with fish. And so the simple meaning of that piece of Talmud is that everything is by divine providence. The fact that the cormorant dives at that